and then Roosevelt came in, of course, and spent, and we had a depression. You know, when Obama spoke about the average American family, he talked about families sitting around their dinner tables, making the hard choices, deciding to cut back on their spending, to rebuild their savings. This is exactly what we need to do, right? This is part of the solution. Unfortunately, Barack Obama wants to undermine all those efforts. He wants to take on debt. What Obama is saying is because American families are not spending and they want to pay off some debt, the U.S. government needs to offset that by spending more and taking on debt. But who does he think the U.S. government is? The U.S. government doesn't have its own money. It only has the money that it takes from those families that are sitting around those dinner tables. So they're sitting around the table deciding they have too much debt and they don't have enough savings and they want to do the right thing, but then the government, on their behalf, takes on additional debt and undoes everything they're trying to do. Because whatever that family manages to save is going to be offset by its share of the debt that Barack Obama is running up. We don't need that. We need the government to do exactly what those families are doing. Everybody has to tighten their belts. From the average family on Main Street to Pennsylvania Avenue, the government, the federal government needs to shrink. They need to make the hard choices. They need to make the budget cuts, just like every American family. But the fallacy is Barack Obama says, but if we do that, if the government cuts back too, then we're going to have a severe recession. Well, exactly. The severe recession is the solution. It's not the problem. The problem was the fact that everybody in this country, from ordinary American families to the federal government, everybody spent too much money. And now we've all got to stop that. And if it means a painful recession, that's life. That's what happens. We shouldn't have been so irresponsible in the first place. But it's funny because when you hear Barack Obama speaking, when you hear him talking about the problems in the U.S. economy, when you hear him talking about the fact that our economy is built on a phony foundation, or he calls it a foundation of sand, and it needs to be one of stone. He says that we have to go from an economy that simply borrows and spends to an economy that saves and invests, that we need to produce more to export, we need to consume less. This is everything that has to happen. But what he is doing in the name of stimulating the economy is exactly what's preventing that from happening. How can Barack Obama talk about all the excess spending and borrowing that created the bubble and then propose the solution of more borrowing and more spending? I mean, that's like a guy walks in to your house, he's stinking drunk, and he's not sure what to do, and you decide to pour him a few more drinks. How is drinking more going to solve somebody being drunk? Right? What Barack Obama doesn't want to do is serve us a cup of black coffee and help us sober up. And it's almost amazing when you read it, listen to his speech. You know, if you just fade in and out, he almost sounds like me. He sounds like half of it he's reading from Crash Proof, and then he contradicts himself. I guess he just reads the speeches. Maybe Barack Obama has several speech writers, and he doesn't even bother to notice. They put the speech together, and he doesn't even realize that he's contradicting himself, with every other line. Maybe he's not even paying attention to what he's saying, and he hasn't even realized it himself. But as I said, it's kind of amazing. But what's bothering me is that by saying some of the right things and then leading the country in the wrong direction, again, that's going to backfire on us. This is like, the same thing with the Republicans. The same thing when George Bush was in there and all the Republican economists were praising the George Bush economy, saying how great things were, and, of course, attributing it to George Bush's embracing of capitalism and his being a conservative and a free market guy, when, of course, he was none of that, and the economy wasn't great. It was a house of cards. And as soon as it collapsed, then he got the blame, as did the free market, and Barack Obama, is certainly taking advantage of that to pursue his big government agenda. And when he talks about rebuilding the U.S. economy on a sound foundation, he wants to dictate that foundation. He thinks that economies can be built on foundations erected by government decree, that the government should allocate all the resources. The government should determine what companies should get capital and what companies shouldn't. It should determine what we produce. That's all nonsense. We need a free market. to erect that foundation. And again, what Barack Obama thinks we need, he's convinced that in order to have this solid foundation, we need better educated workers. We need more education. Well, maybe we do, but we don't need more government education, and we certainly don't need more government money corrupting the education system. The reason that our kids are not being educated is because they're in government schools. And the reason it costs so much money to get such a lousy education is because of all the credit being funneled by the government into the educational bureaucracy. So our universities can charge a fortune for their lousy degrees. And Americans have no choice but to pay the money. And that's what has to end. You know, of course, every time Barack Obama talks about more aid for education, he gets applause from the students he's talking to. Literally, these students know that it's because of all that government aid and all those loans that they're graduating from college with mortgages and no houses. And, of course, to say that, you know, we're not going to have a solid economy unless we fix health care, well, government's not going to fix health care. Government broke health care, and now Barack Obama wants to smash it even further. He wants to run the cost even higher. Now, he thinks he's going to bring the cost down. But how is the government ever? What experience is there of the government ever interfering in bringing costs down? Governments drive costs up. That's why health insurance is so expensive in the first place, because of all the government involvement in health care, and because of the way the government involves itself in the insurance industry, and the way it involves itself in the VA and in Medicaid. I mean, this whole thing is a function of too much government. But Barack Obama is using the crisis as an excuse to advance this liberal agenda, camouflaged as some kind of economic stimulus, saying that we can't solve our problems unless we do this. It's impossible to solve our problems if we follow this prescription. You know, I talked to a reporter again today about the recovery. When is the recovery coming? Unfortunately, there is no recovery. There's no recovery anywhere in sight. We're just making the problems worse. We're digging ourselves into a deeper hole. We're not going to start to recover until we stop digging. So, and unfortunately, we're going to be doing a lot of digging over the next several years. So this depression has got a long way to go. This really is, if you want to compare it to the 1930s, this is 1931, 1932. The depression is in front of us. It's not behind us. And unfortunately, as I said before, I think there's more ignorance about basic economics today than there was back then. I think our politicians have much bigger tools to do far more damage. And the scariest part is that the people in power think they understand why we had a depression. They don't. And they think they know what the government did wrong in the 1930s, and they're determined not to repeat those mistakes. But they're actually repeating all the mistakes in a worse way, and what they're going to ensure is that we don't get a repeat of the 1930s. We get something much worse. We get an inflationary depression, because that's what's coming. Anyway, let me hop to the calls. There's a lot of people queued up. First one is Tony in Illinois. Go ahead, Tony.
Peter, thanks for taking my call.
Hey, Tony, thanks for calling.
Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't seen you on Kudlow recently. What's going on?
You know, they tried to book me tonight, and I had to cancel because I had to do the show. I couldn't. They wanted to do me at the end of the hour, and it was going to be a little too tight. I wanted to do the radio show, so hopefully maybe they'll have me on tomorrow or Friday. We'll see. But they're real last minute, and for some reason they try to get me on Wednesday a lot. I don't know why they pick Wednesday. It's the one night I do the show.
Yeah, I'm also kind of curious why they don't have you on the Kudlow caucus there.
What's that?
The top money managers, journalists, all politician pundits, they all get together, and they have a blog on his website there.
Oh, I don't know. Yes, I don't know anything about that.
Gotcha. Well, my question is, I know you addressed this a couple of times, but, I mean, what's it going to take to abolish the central banks and this fractional reserve banking and return to a free banking system, backed by the gold standard? Because under the Austrian theory, this would constrain unsustainable, volatile fractional reserve banking practices, ensuring that the money supply growth and inflation would never spiral out of control.
Well, there's no question in my mind that it's going to happen. Whether this crisis is going to be what causes it or it's going to be a bigger crisis down the line. But, the bottom line is the free market doesn't work without money. And what we've got now is not money. Money has to have intrinsic value. When 30, 40 years ago, if an American had $1,000, he had something real.